Welcome to the Forefront Radio. This is our continuation on the discussion of Islam and the influence of the black community, how Islam was instrumental in the captivity of our people, and how it's very important for us to understand that the Arabic slave trade was primarily the first that took place prior to the transatlantic war that happened to our ancestors in the Trans-Pacific War. So now let's go to Wikipedia, an encyclopedia that's found online, to verify the information that is pertaining to the Bible of the children of Israel being sold as slaves to the Arabians. But first, let's get a caveat, a starter point to start our journey. We're going to start at Jeremiah chapter 2. Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 14. It says, is Israel a servant? Is he a homeborn slave? Why is he spoiled? So now, what is the description of the children of Israel according to the Bible? Jeremiah chapter 14, verse 2, Judah mourneth, and the gates thereof languish. They are black, they are black, they are black unto the ground, and the cry of Jerusalem is gone up. Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 14 says, is Israel a servant? Is he a homeborn slave? Why is he spoiled? Meaning, why are black people throughout the diaspora, no matter where you go to, always on the bottom? It is because our ancestors were given the laws of God, and instead of following the laws of God, we followed the other nations. We followed their way of life. We followed the Gentiles. In fact, we wanted to be so much like the Gentiles that God said, okay, have at it. You want to be like them? I'm going to make these Gentiles over you and rulers over you. Here's the proof. Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 2. It says, lift up thine eyes unto the high places, and see where thou hast not been lying with, meaning corrupted with. In the ways hast thou sat for them as the Arabian in the wilderness, as the Arabs in the desert. And thou hast polluted thy land with thy whoredoms and with thy wickedness. Meaning what? We were worshiping Baalah. We were worshiping the God of Islam. That's what we were doing. Now watch this. Let's go to Wikipedia and let's touch on the trade war that happened to our ancestors and how we became Islamic. Let's go to Wikipedia. Arab slave trade refers to the various periods in which a slave trade has carried out under the auspices of Arab peoples or Arab countries. The Arab slave trades are often associated with the history of slavery in the Muslim world. So now, the very first picture on Wikipedia shows you a photograph of a young boy who was enslaved by the Arabs from the Sultanate of Zanzibar. Zanzibar is in Tanzania or Tanzania. Okay, Zanzibar is in Tanzania. Many of our people were enslaved in Tanzania. Now watch this. Here are examples of the slave trades that took place. Spain slave trade between the 8th and 15th century. The Barbary slave trade between the 16th and 19th century, the trans-Saharan slave trade between the mid-7th century and the 20th century. Now, I want you to think about this. This just literally said that the trans-Saharan trade of our ancestors being captive to the people of Islam was from the 7th century to the 20th century, meaning it's still going on today, y'all. It's still going on today, y'all. The Indian Ocean slave trade between antiquity and the early 20th century, meaning it's still going on today, y'all. The Cameroon slave trade up until the 19th century, the Zanzibar slave trade up until the 20th century, the Ottoman slave trade, the Red Sea slave trade, the Libyan slave trade. These are all examples of how in the Muslim world, in the Arab world, they took our ancestors and placed them into captivity. You can't make this stuff up, y'all. Tap the screen, get the likes up, share the room with at least 10 people, y'all. Are we having technical glitches? Put a 1 in the chat if the audio is clear. Put a 1 in the chat if the audio is clear. So this information is readily available online, but many people refuse to research it. Let's touch on, for example, slavery in Libya. The history of captivity in Libya has a long history and this lasting impact on Libyan culture. It is closely connected with the wider context of slavery in North Africa and the Red Sea slave trade and the trans-Saharan slave trade. Since ancient times, the territory of modern Libya was a transit area of the slave trade from sub-Saharan Africa across the Sahara and to the Mediterranean Sea. The trans-Saharan slave trade was known from antiquity and continued until the 20th century. Slavery in Ottoman, that's the Turks, Libya, was nominally prohibited, meaning by name only prohibited, in the 19th century, but the abolition laws were not enforced, meaning what? Captivity of our people is still going on to this day in Libya. Captivity of our people is still going on to this day in Libya, y'all. That means in Africa right now, black people are still suffering from the same position that they were in the Americas in the 1800s. Y'all understand how grievous that is? Y'all understand how crazy that is? Very important to understand this information. Watch this. During the Italian colonial period, so Italy had a time period when they were colonizing over that area. The slavery and slave trade was finally suppressed in practice. Abolition was, however, a gradual and slow process, meaning it's still going on. It's still going on in these Arab countries. And the institution of slavery, particularly in the interior desert areas where the Italians' control was weak, the trans-Saharan slave trade in the interior of Libya was still in operation as late as the 1930s. Y'all hear that? As late as the 1930s. In the 21st century, meaning right now, the Libyan slave trade of Africans across the Sahara continues with open-air slave markets reported in the number of cities in Libya, including the capital city, Tripoli. So y'all, do you think I feel anything for these Arabs crying about war when they still to this day have our ancestors in captivity, have our brothers and sisters? Listen, if one of us is a slave, none of us are free. Let me say it again for the kids in the back. If one of us are in captivity, that means none of us are free. So why is it that when we have conversations during so-called Black History Month in America, we rarely, if at all, have discussions about the influence of Ba'allah and Islam in the Muslim world? Why is it that the Nation of Islam, which is very prominent in Northeast America, New England, the Midwest, there's a lot of black people that are involved in Islam. Why is it that they never talk about the Muslim slave trades? It is because it's a cover-up, y'all. You see, it's not as well known as in the Americas of what happened to our people, but right now, to this day, captivity is going on for the sons and daughters of Jacob. You understand? So it's very important for us to realize that this Bible is a true book. Let's go back. Jeremiah chapter 14, verse 2. Judah mourneth, and the gates thereof languish. They are black unto the ground, and the cry of Jerusalem is gone up. Meaning what? The real Jews are black according to the Bible. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 2. Lift up their eyes unto the high places, and see where thou hast not been lined with. In the ways hast thou sat for them as the Arabian in the wilderness. The Arabs in the desert took our people across the trans-Saharan slave trade out of the Middle East, out of Africa, and sold us into Afghanistan, sold us across Libya, sold us in Judea, Syria, Lebanon, Turkey. All of these regions are where black and brown people were scattered. Morocco, Mauritania, Tanzania, Kenya, Kilwa, Mozambique, Zambia, Malawi. These are all areas where our ancestors were taken as enslaved persons. Let's go back. Enslavement of Berbers. Further information can be found in the slavery in the Rashidun Caliphate, slavery in the Umayyad Caliphate, and slavery in the Abbasid Caliphate. Now watch this. When Amr ibn al-As conquered Tripoli in 643, he forced the Jewish and Christian Berbers to give their wives and children as slaves to the Arab army as part of their jizya. This is talking about black Jews and black Christians, y'all. You understand? Watch this. It says, Uqba ibn Nafi would often enslave for himself and to sell to others countless Berber girls, the likes of which no one in the world had ever seen. This is a quote directly taken from the book known as Barbarians, Marauders, and Infidels. This is taken from Basic Books, which was page 124. Now, the Arab by the name of Ibn Abd al-Hakam recounts that a Arab general, Hassan ibn al-Numan, would often abduct young female Berber slaves of unparalleled beauty, some of which were worth 1,000 dinars. Al-Hakam confirms that up to 100,000 were captured by Musa and his son and nephew during the conquest of North Africa. So if you're wondering why there's not a lot of black people in North Africa, why it's a bunch of Arabs there now, it's because the Arabs took our people and sold them as slaves and scattered them all throughout Africa and the Middle East, y'all. All throughout Africa and the Middle East, worshiping their false god Allah. Now watch this. It says, Muslim enslaved all the inhabitants of the Berbers. Musa sacked a fortress near Karun and took with him all the children as slaves. Let's go back. Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 14. Is Israel a servant? Is he a home-born slave? Why is he spoiled? So the Bible is telling you that the children of Israel were sold as slaves, paralleling what we just read in Wikipedia. Let's go back. Wikipedia, under the Arab slave trade, it says, the number of Berbers enslaved amounted to a number never before heard of in any of the countries subject to rule of Islam up to that time. As a result, most of the African cities were depopulated. The fields remained without cultivation. Now I'm going to show you how the Bible says that you would be taken out of your cities and your land would be depopulated. Watch this. Let's go to Leviticus chapter 26. Leviticus chapter 26. Let's read verse 33. It says, and I will scatter you, referring to the Israelites during the Arab slave trade, among the heathen. In this instance, it would be the Arabs. And I will draw out a sword after you, meaning the Arabs would come in and fight against us through war and colonization. And your land, meaning Judea, meaning Morocco, meaning Libya, meaning Egypt, every place where there were black and brown people, your land shall be desolate and your cities waste. What are we reading? The Bible. Let's go back to Wikipedia. Wikipedia says, the number of Berbers enslaved amounted to the number never before heard of in any of the countries that were subjected to rule of Islam up to that time. As a result, most of the African cities were depopulated. Do you see how this parallels the Bible? God says that your cities would be laid waste. We're reading now in Wikipedia how, quote unquote, African cities were depopulated. Even so, Musa never ceased pushing his conquest until he arrived before Tangiers, the citadel of their Berbers country and the mother of their cities, which he also besieged and took, obligating its inhabitants to embrace Islam. Meaning what? Our people were forced into Islam. When you look all throughout Africa, these black folks that say that they're Islamic, the way that they became Islamic was through slavery. Y'all know TikTok messing with my live, right? I just had a TikTok live, and the TikTok live had 200 people in it. Now I'm on live again, and it only has 4 people on it. Y'all understand the Forefront Radio is getting censored, right? This is for educational purposes only. Share the room with at least 10 people, y'all. Share the room with at least 10 people, y'all. Literally just had a live. The live had 200 plus people in the room. Now doing a live again. Now it's only 3 people in the room. You can't make this stuff up. Censorship is real. Censorship is, how can a channel that has well over 11.2 thousand followers only have 5 people in the room? Does that even make sense to you? Does that even make sense? That a page having well over 11,000 followers on it has only 5 people in the room? Nobody got notifications at all? That makes no sense. Let's read on. It says, this is for educational purposes only. The history of Pascual de Gallegos observed, owing to the system of warfare adopted by the Arabs, it is not improbable that the number of captives here specified fell into Musa's hands. It appears both from Christian and Arab authorities that the populous towns were not infrequently razed to the ground, and their inhabitants amounted to several thousands led into captivity. Watch this. Let's go to Luke chapter 21, verse 24. Luke chapter 20, because does the Bible parallel what we're reading here? You better believe it. Luke chapter 21, verse 24. And it reads, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Let's go back to Wikipedia. Wikipedia says, it is not improbable that the number of captives here specified fell into Musa's hands. It appears both from Christian and Arab authorities that populous towns were not infrequently razed to the ground, and their inhabitants amounted to the several thousands led into captivity. You see how the Bible parallels what we're reading here? You see how the Bible parallels what we're reading here? Let's go back to the Bible. Let's go to the book of Nehemiah chapter 5. Nehemiah chapter 5 verse 9. It says, and I said, it is not good that you do. Ought ye not to walk in the fear of our God because of the reproach of the heathen, our enemies? The heathen, our enemies, meaning what? The Arabs never had your best interests at heart. The Romans never had your best interests at heart. The Grecians never had your best interests at heart. Spain never had your best interests at heart. Portugal, France, America, Brazil, Mexico, none of these nations, Canada, none of these nations, Australia, none of these nations had your best interests at heart. Now, let's go back. Wikipedia, we're going to the enslavement of West and Central Africa. The Tuareg and others are indigenous to Libya, facilitated, taxed, and partly organized the trade from south along the trans-Saharan trade routes. In the 1830s, a period when slave trade flourished, Gaddames was handling 2,500 slaves per year. The Regency of Tripoli, that's in Libya, was subjected to Western pressure to end the flourishing trans-Saharan slave trade by the 1840s. But the ruler, though he explained himself willingly in 1842, could not persuade the chiefs of the interior, who were major players in the trans-Saharan slave trade between Bornu and Sokoto, to the Libyan coast. Meaning what? They were taking people that were living in the so-called Middle East, black folks in the Middle East, and exporting them across the Libyan coast. Where did they go to? They went to Europe. They went to Europe. They went to Spain. They went to Portugal. They went to France. They went to Britain. They went to America, across the oceans, because they were sold as slaves by the Arabs to the Europeans. Watch this. Even though the slave trade was officially abolished in Tripoli by the ferment of 1857, this law was never enforced, and continued in practice at least until the 1890s. No, it's in practice today. They're finding people that are enslaved in Libya right now in 2024, y'all. In 2024. So is the Bible a true book? Yes. Y'all pardon me, y'all. I got to go. My little one is making a lot of noise, so let me attend to her. I'll be back shortly. Shalom.